So I'm Nick Allen. I'm a longtime fundraiser in the United States. I lived in Prague and worked across Central and Eastern Europe in the 90s. So it's been So, I'm talking mostly about some things that are working in the US and in the UK. I've been working in both countries. And I'm trying to talk about things that I think you can adapt to use in Poland. But I apologize in advance that I don't know Poland like you do. And some of the ideas I have may be impractical for one reason or another in Poland because of payment methods, because of the way Polish people respond and so forth. But I think it's interesting with digital and mobile fundraising, most methods of working and most messaging approaches work really across the world with obviously with some adaptation to local situation and local conditions. So let's start here. And so some of you may have joined me a couple of months ago when I did the first part of this workshop. We're really going to be talking about mobile, meaning what's in the smartphone. Because as you all know, that's how most people now are using the internet. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But the rough agenda is why mobile, how to start using mobile for fundraising and advocacy, email, Facebook, SMS. I was going to show some examples from two very different kinds of organizations in the US, Human Rights Campaign, which is probably the biggest LGBT activist group, and the Trump campaign, or the Trump basically re-election campaign. How to make your messages simple and effective, mobile advocacy, some mistakes to avoid, a little bit about tech, although you'll really have to investigate the tech in Poland. I can't do that very well from Los Angeles. And I think if you have some questions, please enter them in the chat box and I'll try and answer them as I go along. I think I showed this last time, but I just love this slide. I mean, this is 2005 when a new pope was named at the Vatican. Everybody was looking toward, I guess, St. Peter's and waiting for the announcement. Go forward 8 years, everybody, when a new pope is being announced, everybody has their phone out or their tablet and is trying to take a picture of the announcement of the new pope. And then if you fast forward to 2016, only 3 years later, this is Hillary Clinton running for president of the United States. And you see her fans have all turned their back to her so that they can take a selfie. And all three images relate to how we use our smartphones. At one point we wanted to document, what something looked like. And now we want to include ourselves in the photo. So it must have been kind of funny to be Hillary Clinton or Donald in the last election. You draw a big crowd of people and they all turn their backs on you so they can get themselves in the picture. Now we want to be part of the action. We want to be able to show people, I was there. Here's a picture of me with Hillary or me with President Trump. And I think it's good to keep these ideas in mind as you're thinking, how to communicate with people, because, if you're an NGO, you want to take advantage of the way people are already thinking and adapt your message to the way people are already thinking about things. So first, why mobile? This is a little bit repeated from the earlier workshop, and I'm not sure how many of you were on that, but obviously our phones are always on. I mean, some of us smart people turn them off at night, but for a lot of people, they're on all the time. We've almost always got one close. I saw some study that said typically a phone is within 1 meter of the user. Every phone can send a text message. In other words, whether you've got whatever model of Android, whether it's an old flip phone or the latest Samsung 9 or an iPhone, every single mobile phone can send an SMS. It takes just a few minutes to send an SMS. It's very quick. The length is limited. And the response can be frictionless. It's really easy to respond. So, I've done digital fundraising since 1998. I had the first agency that helped big American NGOs raise money online. And now I've been working more on mobile, but digital has become mobile, and you know, most people are accessing the internet through their phones. You know, if you look at a diagram like this, share of digital media time, half is on smartphones, 34% on desktop. And every quarter, every year, you know, the smartphone percentage is increasing. So, you know, you want to be where people are. And if you showed this diagram for younger people, for people under 40, say, you know, you'd probably see 60 or 65 or 70% of digital media time is spent on the phone, as opposed to the desktop or the tablet. And, you know, for good or for bad, most of the time on smartphones is spent in apps rather than on the sort of pure digital web. You know, here's a shot of, I believe this is for the US, but I think it's fairly similar in most of the world. I mean, these are the top 10 mobile apps by, you know, by audience. So, you know, Facebook, YouTube, Facebook Messenger, Google Search, Google Maps, Instagram, Snapchat. You know, and the exact order might change from country to country, but for good or for bad, a few giant technology companies totally dominate the smartphone. And the bad news for us is that, you know, we're kind of subject to their algorithms, right? I mean, I've got a friend who had a very popular email and, you know, web called Upworthy, where he highlighted very positive stories every day. And they were getting, I think they were getting, they had 200 million monthly users, which is huge. But they depended on Facebook to, you know, distribute their content and for people to share their content. And when Facebook a year ago changed its algorithm, which it's doing all the time, but they made a major change like a year ago, his viewers went down by 40%. He didn't have any advance notice. There was nothing he could do about it. He just had to figure out how to get around it. So, you know, that's the downside of domination by a few large companies and, of course, a few large American companies. So, you know, if you don't look good on mobile, to a lot of your supporters or potential supporters, donors or potential donors, you don't exist. So, and increasingly, you know, mobile, digital, and social are one thing. You know, I think 65% of Facebook views are on a mobile phone, right? The majority of digital views are now on a mobile phone. So, you know, and I think for if we've got if you're trying to make social change, social media is a critical factor. I mean, that is the place. You know, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, maybe Instagram. I'm not sure of, you know, which of these are the most popular, or how they might be used differently in Poland than they're used in the US or the UK or Germany. But, you know, mobile equals digital equals social. It's just a good kind of formula to keep in mind. You know, we use our phones everywhere, right? I mean, you know, I saw some, you know, opinion survey that said 70% of people have their phones when they're in the bathroom, you know. And that's why, you know, Apple makes a fortune on replacement phones, because people drop the phone in the toilet. But please don't do that. So I think, you know, this should, instead of saying means, it should say mobile optimized means. You know, your website should look good on a phone. Your emails should look good on a phone. You should have, if you're asking people to take an action based on either a web page or an email that they see, you know, you have to have buttons that are big enough for people to respond to on a phone. You know, you've just got to be thinking about that very small screen as compared to a much larger screen on a laptop or a tablet. So, you know, without going into how you actually do this, I mean, how do you optimize your content for mobile? It's something you should be thinking about and finding somebody locally who can help you make that happen. You know, page load time, meaning when you click on a link or you click to open an email, you know, it needs to load fast onto the smartphone. If it's slow, even a few seconds slow, a lot of people just skip it and go on to the next thing. So, you know, there's a lot of, you know, I'm guessing that most of you have been, either you've been thinking about this, or if you've got somebody who works on your technology who, maintains your website, who sends your emails, that they've thought about this. But, take a look at your stuff on a phone and make sure that it's easy to read on a phone, because the screen is much smaller. So the font size, the type size has to be bigger. If you want people to touch something to respond, the button has to be big enough that people can touch it with their fingertips, because they're not using a mouse, or a trackpad like they might be on a laptop. You need, we call it snackable content. I mean, the good thing, or probably the bad thing, is that when people are reading on their phones, they're not reading long stories typically. They're not scrolling through 10 or 20 or 30 small screens. They want to read a screen or two. So you need to break up your content. Let's say you've got an article about persecution of Roma in some Polish city. On the one hand, you might have a whole document about it that you published and you hope people in Parliament will look at. But you need to adapt that to people reading it on a phone. So they have 2 or 3 screens. They have the ideas broken down into perhaps bullet points or numbered points that are easy to read. They do not have footnotes. They do not show original PDF documents. I mean, you can make that available on your website, of course, but on the version that people see on the phone, it's got to be short, simple, and compelling. I mean, snackable, like imagine people eating potato chips or peanuts. I mean, they're just going to eat a few at a time. Well, some of us eat the whole bag, but some of us eat just a few at a time. People have a short attention span. They're waiting in their cars. They're standing in line at the supermarket. They're watching TV. Often people on their phones are multitasking, so they're only giving you a little attention. So you've got to be thinking, how do I deal with people who are only giving me a little attention? Making mobile work means making Facebook work, because for good or for bad, Facebook, in most markets is the dominant social media and the dominant way people are going to see information or calls to action from some kind of an NGO, right? I mean, if you're building your email list, they may get your emails. They may occasionally, very occasionally, go to your website, but mostly they're going to see content that you work to get into Facebook. And if you've got money, if you can pay for Facebook ads, that's the sure way to get into people's phones, and it's not very expensive. So just looking at the bullet point, prioritize web content for mobile. I mean, that has to do with when someone goes to your website, they may have a different set of interests if they're on a desktop than if they're on a mobile. On a desktop, they might be looking around for some report in PDF form. If they're on their mobile phone, they're not. As I said before, they're going to be looking for a few highlights, a few snackable bits of information. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit more about this. I mean, I think it's really important to use SMS, text messaging, and if you have it, perhaps premium SMS, where people can make a donation that is added to their mobile bill. I mean, SMS has lots of limitations. It basically is just plain text. While you can send photos or videos, generally people don't do that. It's short, but everybody opens it, right? I mean, if you get a text message, most of your texts are coming from your friends, or perhaps some kind of confirmation of an appointment at the doctor, and everybody looks at it. This is just a kind of generic slide, but when you're thinking of, when you're trying to get people, when you're trying to send people a message, whether it's to come to a meeting, to come to a demonstration, to make a donation, there's a couple of factors that drive response. And I think this is true, across issues, across markets, across calls to action, right? It's the quality of the ask. I mean, how well written or illustrated is the ask you're making to people? The ask, or you could call it a call to action. The number of asks you make, the ease, I mean, here we're talking about donations, how easy it is to make a donation, although this could also be the ease of signing a petition. And then, of course, the number of people you send it to, right? So all of these are factors. And you want to have a good message. You want to send it out numerous times. You want to make it easy to respond. And you want to have as large a list as possible, whether that's people who are subscribing to an email newsletter, people who are visiting your website, people who are seeing, your content in their Facebook feed. You want to have the largest number of people possible. And I would say the greatest weakness for most NGOs is the number of asks. I mean, a lot of us are afraid to ask too often. And yet in every test that I've done over the last 15 years, basically the more you ask, the more people take action. And we're afraid of, well, we don't want to send too many emails. But I mean, in a lot of A/B testing, we've seen that the more you ask, the more people respond. And people typically are getting so much email, they don't even really notice how many messages you've sent them. So they don't hold it against you. They don't think, oh, NGO X, I don't like them because they send me too many emails. Because they're not counting your emails. You're counting your emails, but they are not. Listen, if there are any questions, please write them in the chat box and we'll try and answer them. I mean, this webinar is for you guys, so I want to talk about the issues that you care about. So I thought I'm just going to show some examples of text messaging because I think it has a lot of potential. This is there's a guy named Beto O'Rourke who's is running for the Senate seat held by Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is a Republican from Texas. He was one of the candidates in 2016. And Beto has I mean, this is a seat that was considered an absolutely safe seat for Ted Cruz and for the Republicans. It's in Texas. But Beto, is running a surprisingly effective campaign. And he's been pretty good about using text messaging. So I saw an ad on Facebook. I should have showed it here, but saying, get text messages from Beto. And of course, I like to sign up for everything to see what people are doing. So I texted, you can see in the little green box, I texted Beto, which is guy's first name. It's kind of an unusual name. And I get a response, welcome to Beto for Texas Mobile. We have some questions to get you signed up. What's your full name? So I text back my full name, and they went, back and forth like that, trying to get information from me so that they would have more information. Because when people sign up for text messaging, often all they're giving you is their mobile number. So you don't really know where they live, who they are, what their interests are. So then a few days later, I got a message saying, Trump just sent his first tweet attacking Beto. Contribute an urgent donation to Beto's campaign. So, they were using they were trying to take advantage of Trump's tweet to get their supporters who are, I would say, 100% against Trump, to get their supporters to donate to Beto. So, in a political campaign or also in NGO campaigns, I mean, you want to take advantage of the news. If there's some piece of news that can convince your supporters to give you money or come to an event or sign a petition, you want to use that. So I then tapped load to preview. If you see that little box under the second text message. Oh, I'm sorry. I must have lost that slide. Anyway, it took me to a donation page. So, it took me right back from this text message to a mobile web donation page where I could fill in my information and donate $25, $50, $100, $500 to Beto. And they're constantly, whenever Beto or his opponent are in the news, they're sending out these text messages, which get probably a 95% open rate, right? I mean, when I get a text message, I look at it. When I get an email, I ignore most of them. And that's how most people behave. Here's some, Donald Trump's president, but he's already running his re-election campaign for 2020. And he does a pretty good job. This is his mobile list. And, he hits on his usual themes, but I imagine he gets a very good response from his audience. I mean, I subscribe to everybody's list to see what they're doing. So, you can see these are three. This was all one message, actually. He tends to send these very long text messages. Most people keep them short, but, they probably have tested it and found that, Trump's base is very excited about him and is willing to read long things. So ultimately, almost all these things are about raising money. But you can see the media is panicking, contribute to the movement. You know, a typical thing in American fundraising is matching gifts, which are kind of baloney, but their idea is you give $25 and it will be quadrupled by some other donor. You can watch a video, you can read about the fake news. You know, I want to crush our end of month goal, so I'm requesting that all gifts before midnight tonight will be triple matched. So, you know, he's trying to, as you're probably doing in your fundraising, you always are trying to build urgency. You know, we need the money now. We need the money by next Tuesday because X will happen if we don't get it. And, you know, so they've got both the deadline of midnight and they've got the triple match. And, you know, we used to do this a lot. We would go to an existing donor and say, can we tell people that, you know, we will use your gift to match other people's gifts? And usually donors love that idea because they feel like they're leveraging their donation. Anyway, ultimately, if you click on any of these links, you get to the donation page here. And, you know, this says this was from last month, August deadline. You can choose the amount you want to give, etc. Oh, I'm sorry. Here's the Beto thing. I had the slides reversed. You know, so, you know, the Beto pages are similar to the Trump pages. You know, you know, but for Beto supporters, Trump is kind of the enemy. So they phrase it in those ways. Help Beto fight back against Trump's first attack. So, you know, if you're a Beto supporter, you're going to get excited about this. And they even reprint President Trump's tweet here, you know, attacking Beto. You know, so if your enemy attacks you, that's great ammunition for raising money. I mean, obviously, you have to adapt that to your own situation in Poland. And then, you know, the phone, when you're making a donation on the phone, the handset, the telephone knows what payment methods you're signed up for. So I use an iPhone and I use Apple Pay. And so the phone knows that I have Apple Pay. And if you see the top of the middle column, it says donate via Apple Pay. I mean, the other way Americans would most likely donate is with a credit card, but Apple Pay makes it even easier. So they're using the intelligence of the phone to offer me the easiest way to pay. And you can see on the third screen here, I don't know, can you see the pencil there? They're offering me pay with Apple Pay or donate by credit card or PayPal. So they're giving me three choices. But Apple Pay requires the least amount of information to be filled in. And, you know, we like to call this frictionless payment. I mean, you don't have to fill in a lot. The more form fields you have to fill in, especially on a phone, the fewer people actually make the donation. Right? People lose interest, they give up. One of my clients is the Humane Society, which is the biggest animal welfare organization in the U.S. And over the years, I've helped them develop a pretty good text messaging program. And I just was going to show, these are some slides we put together for a presentation called at Bridge about a month ago. But I just want to run through these to show the variety of ways that Humane Society uses text messaging. Now, obviously, you know, I don't think any of you are working on animal protection issues, but the way Humane Society uses it can be adapted for any organization. So, you know, this is kind of and Humane Society is known as HSUS, Humane Society of the United States. So, you know, they always start their text messages with their name so people know where it's coming from. So, you know, Costco indicated 8 years ago it would go cage-free. That refers to, you know, not having chickens in cages when they're laying eggs. Costco's a big supermarket chain. So now one of its egg suppliers was caught caging hens. Will you ask Costco to go cage-free? Reply yes now. So, you know, they're basically asking they've got about 250,000 people on this list. They're asking them to contact Costco supermarket to, you know, remind them that they pledge to not lock up chickens in cages. You know, and you know, whether you care about this issue or not, it's a good example of activism. So I reply yes, and then I say great. Now they set up something pretty sophisticated, which I'm guessing doesn't exist in Poland, but technically it isn't very difficult to set up. You know, they ask you to call this number, and you'll get talking points. In other words, you'll get 2 or 3 things you can say to the Costco representative, and then they'll pass you through on that same line to the Costco office. And then they also say, you know, ask a friend to do the same thing. So you tell your friend, text egg to 30644, which, you know, sounds kind of fun. And this technique of, we call it patch through calling. Again, I'm not sure if there's any off-the-shelf program in Poland for that, but it enables you to send people a text message and then let them, with one click, connect to a target. I mean, the target could be, you know, a ministry, it could be a member of parliament, it could be a corporation, it could be, you know, I mean, it could be the telephone company, it could be anybody. You know, here's one where Humane Society is traveling around the U.S. to talk about its program. You know, Nebraska is a state in the U.S., so Nebraska Town Hall Tour. Ellen, we're coming to a town near you to talk about Nebraska animal advocacy. Here's information about the event. So, you know, this is just an informational text message, and people click on the link and they see what's taking place in Nebraska, where a Humane Society representative is speaking. And of course, they've got the location, you know, the city and state of the people who are on this list. So Ellen presumably lives in Nebraska, and if she lived in New York, she wouldn't get this particular message. You know, breaking news, Gucci is going fur free. I mean, Humane Society has campaigned against clothing manufacturers using animal fur. So this one, you know, they're not asking you to do anything. They're just celebrating a victory. And, you know, donors and activists love it when the organizations they support, you know, have a victory. So you want to promote your victories. You know, this is just something for fun, right? This baby chimpanzee is in our care in Liberia, and he needs a name. Should we call him? And they have 4 names. Now, these kind of things, and you can reply, you know, A, if he should be called Kawura, B, if he should be called RW, etc. You know, this is kind of a little game, and people love this kind of stuff. I mean, it works better with animals than other stuff, but you know, people love answering little quizzes. I mean, you've probably seen them on Facebook, right? And this could easily go on Facebook, and it makes people feel good about the organization. You might ask people to forward it to a friend, etc. You know, here there was a hurricane in Puerto Rico, and you know, HSUS, we're providing critical aid for people and animals. Will you make an emergency gift to our disaster relief fund? And if you click on the link, you go to a donation page. You know, so a nice picture, very short call to action, etc. You know, so why bother with with SMS? SMS stands for short messaging service, but it's messages. You know, I think the main thing. Look at the bottom here. The average open rate for SMS, 99%. The open rate for fundraising emails from Humane Society, 13%. Right, so if you send 100 emails, only 13 of them are open. Obviously, an email can have more information in it. It can have photos, etc., but most people don't actually open it. Same with Facebook, 8%. If you've got, you know, 5,000 Facebook fans, and you know, and only 8% of them are going to see your post unless you pay. Whereas SMS, almost everybody sees it, and you know, so the response rates are higher. And the cost to send an SMS is, you know, should be either nothing or pretty low. You know, an SMS is, you know, it's more personal than an email. It's more private than a social media post, and it's more casual than a phone call. So it's got a lot going for it. This is Jay-Z and Beyonce responding to an HSUS text message, which I think is a fantasy of HSUS, but I hope you're all laughing. You know, this is data from the Humane Society. You know, so donations via mobile are slowly increasing. You know, typically the conversion rate means what percentage of people who see a call to action, you know, actually make a donation. So, you know, if you send out 1,000, if you send out 100 emails, you know, the conversion rate might be 1%. So 1% of one person out of 100 people who got the emails would actually make a gift. And the conversion rate on a mobile phone is typically lower because it's, you know, it's more of a hassle to put in your information on a tiny phone screen than on a larger screen. but that's changing, especially as people under 30 or 40 are looking at almost everything on mobile and barely look at a laptop. So right now, and in general, to big non-political NGOs, older, most donors are older, over 40, 45. Their online donors are younger than direct mail donors, but young people, 20-somethings, typically don't give very much. They don't have the money. They're not used to giving. They have other things to do with their money. But so for Humane Society, for the age 55 plus, which is kind of the sweet spot for their donations, it's only 20% of the mobile traffic, but 54% of the online donors, even age 55 and up, are giving on mobile. So mobile is working for donations. I won't go into these numbers. A webinar will be available, or I think we can distribute a PDF of this if you're interested in numbers. But also, of course, your numbers are different. This is for a large national American group. Your groups are probably going to be generally smaller. Poland's a smaller country, maybe fewer people involved in NGOs. Your metrics are not going to be the same as these, but these give an idea of kind of metrics you might be looking at. And whatever the metrics are now, they're increasing for mobile because more and more people are spending more and more time on their phones. There are two kinds of fundraising with text messages. One, first, the bottom one is just, you send people a link to a donation page, and they're basically just going to a donation page on the web, hopefully a very simple page, where they put in their credit card or their banking information and make a donation. The other is premium SMS or PSMS, where people make a donation that is billed to their mobile bill. And I believe this is possible in Poland, but I don't know that it's used much. I want to just show a few Facebook ads because I consider Facebook mobile. Most people look at Facebook on their phones. This is American Civil Liberties Union, a big civil liberties group that works on lots of issues. It works on immigration issues. It works on racism issues, LGBT issues, civil liberties issues, freedom of the press issues. And it's actually one of my clients. It's interesting. There's a new Facebook recently decided to become more transparent about the advertising. So if you go to an organization's page on Facebook and you go to the very bottom, it says info and ads. And you can actually look at all the ads that the organization is running on Facebook at the time. So you can, it's an incredible thing because you can see sort of what ads your competitors are running. Now, you don't necessarily know which one is more successful, but if you're somebody like the ACLU, you've got a lot of volume on Facebook and you're constantly testing stuff. So the ads you're showing here are probably ones that have worked. And I thought I'd just show a couple to get an idea of how this, ACLU is basically an advocacy organization, although of course they're also trying to raise money for this. So, on the left here is a Facebook ad. Facebook is doing a big campaign around making sure people are registered to vote in what we call the midterm elections in November, in 2 months, 3 months. And they have these ads for, it says, I'm voting for immigrants' rights. They have similar ads, I'm voting for LGBT rights, and many issues. But so here's, this election day, let's, I can't even read it actually. But it asks you, pledge to vote for immigrant rights. And it says sign up. So if you click the sign up button, you go to this page. This is a web page here. Obviously, this was taken off of a laptop, not a mobile, because it's horizontal, not vertical. But commit to vote for your rights. Commit to vote like your rights depend on it, which is kind of an ACLU slogan. So basically, they ask you first name, last name, mobile phone number. And they're running, I have no idea what their spend is, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars on this. I'm not involved in it, I don't know exactly. But and they're running, and this is a way of just building their list. And then they'll send you more messages. They'll ask you for money. They may ask you to come out and do something in the city where you live, etc. But they're running these Facebook ads. These are paid Facebook ads. They might be spending, I'm guessing they're spending like $1 to get each sign up. And I don't know what the conversion rate, the number of people who see the ad compared to the number of people who sign up. I have no idea. It's probably under 1%. You know, I showed these last time. This is from a big gay rights group called Human Rights Campaign. I mean, they're doing all sorts of different things, including you know, they're offering a free Human Rights Campaign baseball cap if you make a donation. I mean, they've got every kind of, they use a lot of, they adapt a lot of techniques from commercial sales. But again, you can see the fonts are pretty, this is all screen captured from a phone. The fonts are big, so it's easy to read. You know, here was one where they try and get you to the message by, how are you celebrating Pride? You know, that's an annual like week or month celebrating gay pride. So I'm attending Pride celebrations. I'm using my voice to stand up for the LGBT community. I'm taking advocacy action. Basically, they just want you to click on one of these and it takes you to a donation page. And this has worked pretty well for them. Here's a chance to win. Will and Grace was sort of a groundbreaking, you know, big network TV show that had a gay guy in it. This was like 20 years ago, and it's just being brought back. So they convinced the producers to let one of their supporters watch a taping of the show, and they have a whole contest, you know, fly to Los Angeles and attend a live taping of Will and Grace, which probably was a super attractive offer to their audience, you know. And they sent out numerous emails. Did you enter yet? Did you enter yet? Etc. You see you know, it's really easy. The buttons are easy to push. You know, if you want to give $35, $100, $250. The form fields are really big to make it easy to fill out on a phone. Let's see. So I listed 4 mobile mistakes to avoid. I figured there was no use listing a mistake, but you know, one is keeping your web pages and emails light. Keeping them, don't have big, heavy images that take up a lot of space. You know, put the information that supporters want at the top of your web page and the top of your emails. Don't make people scroll or read too much. I mean, you know, it's probably a crisis of attention deficit, right? I mean, phones make people, you know, they divert people's attention to a million unimportant little things, but it makes it harder to get your message across. And if you're an NGO, you've got to figure out, how can we explain our message in a few words? How can we make it visually compelling? So, you know, make sure that, don't assume that people, I mean, years ago, I did a focus group with, a series of focus groups with Amnesty International, the US branch of Amnesty. And of course, you know, we had selected mostly donors, mostly people who, in this particular, one of the groups was donors who've been giving for 10 years or more. And, you know, these, we learned, really, really loved Amnesty. But when we asked them what they thought of different issues that Amnesty was working on, most people didn't even know that Amnesty was working on those issues. And of course, we were looking at, you know, we had the information, we knew exactly what emails and paper, you know, postal mail these people had gotten. And they loved Amnesty, but they didn't really pay any attention to the messages we were sending them. And it taught us that, you know, don't assume, just because you know what you've sent people, don't assume that people have absorbed that. I mean, and you really got to make your message simple, and you got to repeat it over and over again, because you're focused on your message, but your supporters, even if they love you, are not paying nearly as much attention to it as you are. You know, the mobile mistake here is, I guess my syntax isn't very good, but I mean, you want to send more messages. Most groups, as I mentioned earlier, don't send enough messages. They're afraid they're sending too many when their supporters are not reading most of them anyway. So, you know, send more emails. You know, don't send as many text messages, but send text messages too. What I meant to say here, this isn't well stated, is that, you know, people notice your SMSs because it's in a mailbox that they check a lot, and you don't want to make people feel they're being bombarded with too many messages. Whereas emails, if they get them and they're not interested, they just ignore them. So I guess these 2 points seem contradictory. Send more messages, but don't send too many. And it's, you know, it's hard to know where the line is, but I would guess that most of you are not sending enough. And, you know, some of that is a result, you just don't have the staff time to, you know, write the messages and set them up and send them. But, you know, maybe I should delete don't send too many messages. Just say send more. So getting started. If you're going to send text messages, or if you're going to send emails, obviously you've got to get people's email address. We have a question. What's the question?
Yes, we have a question. That's a question from our colleague in Slovakia, I suppose. The question is, newsletter works for us and generates donations. How many pieces of news should we share regularly? What would you suggest? That's the question.
Well, oh, sure, good question. I mean, I don't, obviously I don't know your organization, and I don't want to say you should share 6.2 because I don't know, but probably it would be better to share fewer items in each newsletter and send the newsletter more often. Because, most people aren't going to scroll down and read all the items. They like the idea that they're getting something from an organization they like. So if you've got 8 items, I would send 4 in one and 4 in the next. But of course, I can't, there isn't any absolute answer. It's just, I think you'll see, more people will read it if it's shorter, or people aren't going to, people will only read the first 2 or 3 items anyway. So there's no use sending them, 8 items if they're only going to read the first 3 or 4. If you had a big enough, that's the kind of thing it's hard to test that. Theoretically, you could send 2 versions and see which got a better response, but it's hard to. Just to go back here, so start collecting mobile numbers and emails. And with mobile numbers in the U.S., people have to indicate that it's okay to send messages to their phones. I'm not sure if you have that kind of consent issues in Poland, but collect that stuff on web forms, collect it at events, collect it in Facebook and other advertising. My slide is not advancing. Okay, what ways to generate new leads online and on mobile would you suggest to grow our subscription list, apart from Facebook lead generation? Yeah, I mean, Facebook lead generation is good, but it costs money. Well, here's, I think in every, so let's think about that. How do you build, building your list is one of the most critical things. Well, one is if you can afford some advertising, you can put this on your own website. Then it depends how much website traffic you have, so that, your ideal should be collecting the email address and ideally the mobile phone number of as many people as possible who visit your website. Then the question is how many people visit your website, right? But, a lot of US organizations use petitions, and again, some of that is just an American, petitions are a very American way of doing things. It may be different in Poland, but, is there something where people can sign a petition or a pledge? For a long time, I've worked for a lot of advocacy groups like Human Rights Campaign or American Civil Liberties Union, but I've also done a lot of work for UNICEF, for instance. And UNICEF is not a political organization. They don't take positions on controversial issues. They don't advocate in front of Congress or Parliament. So we talked with them once about, could we do a petition to build the list? And we agreed we would do something on child sex trafficking. And that's an issue that almost everybody is against. It's not controversial. It was not a legislative issue or a partisan issue. And, we ended up getting, like 100,000 people signing a petition against child sex trafficking, which is part of UNICEF's mission, right? UNICEF's mission is protecting children around the world. So sometimes you can think of a sort of a relatively not controversial issue that lots of people would like to support. So, it's really, think about, in terms of building your list, some kind of a petition. And of course, Edward was saying, because of GDPR, you need active consent. American NGOs are lucky we don't have GDPR yet, although a lot of organizations are trying to adapt to it because it undoubtedly will become a worldwide standard. So, you've got to get people's active consent, but I think if you're working on an issue that people care about, people will give you their consent. And, without getting into a long discussion of GDPR, people who have indicated they support you and want to hear from you, you can message them. So it's, Edward was saying we have signatures from a petition but cannot use it for newsletter or other topics. Now, I don't know, is that a question that when people sign the petition, do you need to sort of opt people into receiving other information from the organization? Again, I don't know, I'm not an expert on GDPR, but I was just talking with my colleagues in the UK, and I think they believe that on a lot of these things, if people have signed up for something and indicated they want to hear from you, that under GDPR you can't message them. But I mean, you could have a whole webinar on GDPR and how that applies to organizations. So building the list. So one is some kind of a petition or some kind of a sign up. Another one that you're probably already using is sign up for our newsletter. The downside of that is that, most people don't want a newsletter. They feel like they already have too much information, and they know if they need more information, they can Google it and get it. So I think it's harder to get people to subscribe to newsletters, and it's harder to get people to read them because people get so much email, and even our best supporters are not necessarily that interested in reading our newsletter. I mean, it's still a good thing to have because some people love it. Facebook advertising, you can try and get people to sign up on Facebook for free, but the problem is, if you don't pay, Facebook doesn't show your post to very many people. But if you can afford a budget of even, 50 or 100 euros a month, I mean, you can do some Facebook advertising, which can build your list. And I think it's worth doing. I mean, you may hate to give Facebook even more money, but it does get, if you can get the capital to invest, it can pay off. I mean, if you get someone to sign up through a paid Facebook post or a lead generation, you can usually make the money back from that person within a year. Again, depending on your size and how much money you have available. It's also something we've sometimes gone to donors. If you've got some donors who could give you, 500 euros or more, you can say to them, think of this as an investment. I mean, we're not just taking your money. We're going to use that to try and build the organization. And we're going to spend that $500 on advertising on Facebook. Obviously you have to find a donor who believes in that. But I think it's often donors like the idea that their money is going to help, that their money is going for a specific strategic use like that. Twitter can work for some people who can build a Twitter following. If you're, tweeting about an issue and you've got a fair number of followers and viewers, you can have a call to action where you ask people to, either follow you on Twitter or sign up for a newsletter. I mean, that's obviously free. If you're doing any kind of events, the numbers are typically small at an event, but those are people who really like you. Be sure you're capturing their information and their consent, their permission on some kind of a card or a tablet at the door or at the event. Amnesty's done a lot of work at music concerts in the summer. Again, I don't know whether that would make any sense in Poland or not. I mean, obviously, then you've got to be able to use people in the 20-something demographic or 30-something demographic, depending on what group it is or what kind of an event it is. Just a little bit on SMS. If you're sending out text messages, if you have a small list, you can actually just send all of them from one phone. I mean, it's kind of time consuming, but you basically just cut and paste the message over and over again to a different number, or you could send it to a group of numbers, but then that probably would be a privacy issue. Or you can pay for a commercial text messaging service. I mean, I Googled some, and I have no idea if these organizations are good. I don't really understand their pricing. They show that they offer services in Poland, but I don't know that for sure. But you could Google this, on a Polish-oriented page, and you might get different numbers. But these were just a couple of companies that offer this kind of service. Again, I'm not endorsing them. I'm just saying this seems to be something that people are offering in Poland. And I don't know anything about these companies, but we've just got another minute here, getting started. Start the messaging program, send out 2 or 3 messages a month. Like the Humane Society did, try different offers. Ask people to give money, present people with breaking news, make calls to advocacy action. you know, thank people when you've had a, you know, we just had a victory and it's all because of your support. People love to hear that. You know, it may seem old, it might not seem interesting to you, but people like to be thanked. We all like to be thanked. Takeaways: if you don't look good on mobile, you don't exist. Mobile equals digital equals social. On any kind of messaging, you know, whether it's web, email, Facebook, SMS, you know, make it easy and make it fast. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Go out and raise a lot of money. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Adios.